Laura O'Connor, and I am our host today for the Well series interview. This is women who are empowering, leading, and leveraging their experience to have an impact on the real estate community. And my guest today is somebody that I met a number of years ago and have been tracking with interest, both for her professional accomplishments as well as some of the more interesting and exciting things that she's been doing recently. So welcome, Kelly. I am so happy to have you joining me.
Yeah, thank you. It's so good to be here and always good to see you. I mean, I know it's Zoom and we got to see each other a few weeks ago, but happy to see you again and be able to chat with you.
Yeah, it's always more fun in person, but I'll take any time to connect and catch up.
Me too. I love it. It's so fun. I'm glad you're doing this. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, before we jump in just with questions, I'd love to get a little bit more about your background. As mentioned, I've known you for a number of years, but your experience in the real estate and sort of general coaching, consulting, and recruiting, you have this wide and varied background. So maybe give us a snapshot over the last couple decades of your experience.
Will do. Yeah. Well, first of all, I love the real estate industry for the opportunities that it has given me in my career. And I actually started my career in Dallas, Texas, of all things, with Keller Williams Realty. And it was literally, I think, one of the first regions outside of Austin, Texas to launch. And I had the good fortune of working with the owner of that region, launching, I think we launched 14 offices in 2 years.
Wow.
And boy, I had not been in real estate before then. So that was an interesting dynamic because I didn't sell real estate before I had been in another industry. And then I had the great fortune of meeting Gary Keller. And so then I came to Austin and was able to actually work there as a corporate executive during a very critical juncture in time where they were building Keller Williams University. And so we launched a lot of the foundational systems and programs there, the consulting and the maps, coaching, and some of the career visioning and recruiting systems that they had during the time that I was there. And so I learned so much about real estate and how to function as an executive and how to time block and all of those things in that environment. And then it set me up nicely for an opportunity once I decided to move into something else a little bit more entrepreneurial. I ended up going out into the field, and then I had a friend who launched a mortgage bank. And so I was part of launching a mortgage bank in Austin, which led to then launching an independent residential real estate brokerage in Austin with a couple of business partners, and ultimately ended up at BH&G, Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, at the Realogy system at the time, which is now Anywhere, working for Sherry Chris. And then had the opportunity, my last gig was building T3 Talent with T360, which is a management consulting company in the residential real estate industry, and building the executive recruiting and staffing division of T3 Talent. And so I've done a little bit of everything, I want to say. I sold real estate at some point. I've, done recruiting, but I've always gravitated to people and operations and just recruiting, anything with people.
Awesome. So you have been, if I heard you right, in and out of sort of entrepreneurial gigs and W-2 gigs. Like, what's your favorite? Do you have one? Is there like a preference?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, it's funny that you asked, because when I think about it, I think that the common theme would be that I was in entrepreneurial employment situations pretty much in everything that I did. So I was always launching something, it seems like, at the company that I was at. But I have really enjoyed having the opportunity to be able to be in and out of my own entrepreneurial things that I do and that I like to do. And I think that we don't always talk about that as an industry, that it's, or even just when we're thinking about the trajectory of our career, that it's okay strategically to be in and out of a W-2 situation and building your own thing and all of the nuances that go with that. Like, I think that fundamentally, I was still learning so many things in organizations that it's prepared me exactly to where I need to be now, which is in my next entrepreneurial activity, if you will.
I love that word you use there, strategically. So like about that? Like, what is it that you're strategically looking for? I heard, that you were learning while you were at these different organizations, but what is it in terms of like your long-term vision for yourself, for what you're doing? How does strategy play into that? I haven't really thought about a career or thinking about retirement as like strategic moves necessarily.
Yes, I think like initially when I was working in the Keller Williams system, I was learning so much about real estate. And so I knew that there were two things strategically I wanted to do, which was learn everything that I could about executive leadership in the real estate industry. And I also learned a ton about franchising. But I also wanted to focus on building national relationships because I thought that if I had the knowledge and the relationships, that then that would catapult me into kind of whatever the next situation would be. But I really started with the end in mind, which was I knew at a young age that I didn't want to necessarily be 75 and still feel the pressure of working. Not that I wouldn't want to work, because I love working and I love producing. And it brings me a lot of the fulfillment of my life is around doing work that fulfills me and helping other people. But I knew that I was looking at wanting financially to be set in a way. And so most of my time in and out of making decisions has been, what do I need to learn and do, and also accumulate as it relates to money, identity, accomplishments, and all of those things that become the collateral for a continued career of success, also while saving for retirement in order to live the life that I want to live when I say that I don't want to work anymore. That was a lot of words.
No, that's incredible. So yes, you can do something that maybe is a strategic W-2 job because of the 401k or because of the connections and the network and building your sphere. Clearly, you have built an incredible sphere. I think they were actually a recommendation from one of my prior interviews when I always ask at the end and say, who should I interview next? And your name has come up a couple of times. So again, it's clear that you have made a lot of relationships, core, great, solid relationships in this industry over that time. How do you know when it's time to transition? Like, I think we talked when we were in person, and you'd use this word core transitions, or sort of the idea of a reset. So what was it for you? What's going on? How did you know the timing was right? And what did you do to sort of mentally prepare yourself for this next venture?
Yeah, it's interesting that you ask about transitions too, because when I think back in my career transitions that I've made, when I was younger, I think that they kind of happened, and I just went through a door. The door opened and I went through, right? Whereas as I've gotten a little bit older, I feel like that I'm thinking more about, in the next 5 or 7 years, what do I want to do? And so with this last transition, I went into the situation willing to invest 5 years into it. And I had some specific things that I wanted to accomplish in those 5 years. And I accomplished them. And then at that point, I felt like the next thing that I wanted to do was going to be to do something different. And so I started thinking about, okay, how do I, first of all, set myself up financially in a way where I don't have to be stressed out about starting something entrepreneurial, so that I have the runway to be able to do it. And then secondly, how do I leave my current situation in a way that takes care of everybody? Because there were a lot of people involved in what I was doing. There were clients, there were candidates that I was talking to, there was the company in which I worked. And so it was really important for me to demonstrate leadership in that transition, such that I took care of myself, the other people, and really thinking ahead and planning ahead in order to do that, which isn't always easy to do.
Yeah, that's the exact opposite, or I guess maybe somewhere in the middle between like quiet quitting and loud quitting. It is like full transparency, open, clear communication, and let me help be the guide that like moves the organization to exactly where they need to be so that I can take that next step. And they're also excited and moving on, with the right team and process and everybody taken care of. So I think we need more of that. We need more people talking about how you can respectfully make moves and help guide it into a win-win for everybody involved.
I agree. And I do think this time what's interesting is that I loved what I was doing. And then there was something inside of me that I knew it was time. Whereas in the past, and that this may resonate for some people listening, whereas in the past, I would have just kept going. But I was really listening to myself internally, and I knew that there were some things, it was fundamentally some of the work that I was doing ultimately that was not the thing that I knew that was going to fulfill me long term. And it was really hard to do it because I loved who I worked with. And, there were so many things that I loved about it, but I just knew deep down that it was time. And so it took some self-reflection, some coaching from other people, and some help before I really got to that place.
Yeah. Well, I should have probably said this at the beginning, but full disclosure, I actually am in the position I'm in because of Kelly. She approached me and recruited me and, sold me on JPAR. And it was so great getting to know the T360 crew and you, and obviously coming up on my 2-year anniversary. Can you believe it's been that long?
Honestly, like yesterday.
I will be here and having a fantastic time. So thank you for that. And when I heard, I didn't actually hear that you were leaving to start your own thing. I heard that you were going on a walk. To put it sort of simply. So it's a little bit more than a walk, but that's how I first heard about it. So from some of your colleagues when I was talking to them. So tell us about what this pilgrimage was, why you decided to do it, and then what your takeaways were.
Yeah, that's great. That's really funny that that's what you heard, which I love, because those who really know me know that I'm a walk and talker and I love walking. And I've always really enjoyed being outside and, being active. So when I decided to make a career transition, I was like, what am I going to do? And my husband kept saying, you really should take some time, a couple of weeks, and take some time off and do all of this. And then he reminded me that I had always wanted to walk the Camino de Santiago. And so I was like, oh yeah, like now would be the time to do it. And so I started getting really excited thinking about it and doing research and, looking at all the different routes. And so you really have a lot of options these days on how you can walk the Camino de Santiago, which essentially is, they call it the Way of St. James, so people know what that means. St. James walked from basically across France and Spain, and then also Portugal, which was where I was. And so all of the paths lead to Santiago de Compostela, which essentially that's where St. James is buried, if you will. And so these are the pilgrimages that people would do in in other generations. So it tends to be, it was originally a religious pathway. It's a lot of people walk it out of spirituality. And for me, I just decided that it would be this great way for me to clear out and reset and let it just evolve what I was going to do next, instead of thinking about exactly what I was going to do. So I set off to walk across Portugal and Spain. And I decided to do this on my own. You can do it with other people, but we decided, my husband and I, he was like, you should just get up and do what you want, eat what you want, go where you want, wear what you want, just like do whatever you want for once, And so that's kind of what I did. I set off to just be in a space of reflection and see what would come up and allow things to happen along the journey.
Wow, that's incredible. Were you nervous or afraid at all? Were you like, I think about like, how many miles is it that you?
Yeah, it's 254 kilometers.
So if you're thinking about that before you start, it just seems like such a long way to go. Of course, you broke it down, right? Into like step-sized pieces.
It's amazing what happens when you take things and you just break it down, and then you do the plan and you go and you walk. But the terrifying thing was well, I started in Portugal. I had never been there and I don't speak Portuguese. And so everyone told me that most people spoke English, but I didn't necessarily have that experience. And so I remember, like, the first day I started walking, I was absolutely the most terrified that I've probably ever been in my entire life, with my backpack on my back and going, I think I'm walking, 15 miles today or whatever it was. And then I got on the path, and then there was literally no one that whole first day. And I remember thinking, in fact, I did a video log, and it's hilarious because I said, am I doing this wrong? Like, I kept thinking, what is wrong that I don't see one other person on here?
Right.
Yeah, so it was a couple of days of that, but by the third day, I was loving it. I was like, this is great. I'm, perfectly just happy to meander around and walk and stop and look at churches and, eat ham sandwiches and eat,
Oh,
drink cafe con leche.
oh, it sounds phenomenal. And you do have some videos that you posted, right? You have a YouTube
Yeah.
channel with those. I watched a few of them when you were on here, when I needed
Oh,
I'm going to take myself out of, my day of meetings and have a lunch break. And I'm going to pretend I'm on the El Camino
yeah.
with Kelly. And it was really fabulous. I mean, some of the scenery, the thoughts that you shared, that you were sort of that inner exploration and what bubbles up to the surface. You mentioned something, I think it might have been in one of those, where you talked about dealing with our own fear is the best way to get to our end result, right? Is just sort of approaching that head on.
Yeah, absolutely. The evolution and the community, you're like kind of weirdly, you're in a bubble. I did finally find some other people on the trail.
Yeah.
And you kind of are in a bubble where everyone is like wide open. So like you could walk up to someone and say, hey, why are you on the Camino? And they'll be like, well, I met a guy and he's like, well, my wife died 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so then they just talk, and it's like this healing process. But it's like you get to know people so fast that you would normally never encounter because, we're just doing our thing and we don't slow down necessarily enough to like engage like that. And so it was a really cool experience of, I think I called it like the great equalizer, because everyone's doing the path, and I saw all ages, all nationalities, all languages. I mean, and it's just the coolest experience of the microcosm of people really being better people. Like if something happened to you, someone was going to help you on that trail, and you then didn't feel afraid because you knew that there was going to be somebody there.
That is amazing. And I'm definitely adding that to my bucket list of things that I must try to go out and get done. So
Well,
I'm
watch out.
inspired.
It's addicting. You'll want to continue. I'm ready to go back again. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to manage that. So beware.
Okay, I'll try to not get too addicted to it, but I'm serious. I think it's really inspiring and
Thank you.
very exciting. Is there anything new that's inspiring you right now that you're sort of fascinated with? Who are you looking up to while we're looking up to you from your El Camino walk?
Yes. Well, I'm kind of one of those people who I get into things and I really like exploring it. And right now, starting something new, a lot of my brain power is going into creativity, and I'm learning a lot of new things, which I love. I mean, that's the greatest thing about launching things, I think, is all the new stuff you learn. But I think I was telling you recently that I've somehow become very, very interested in rock climbing, which is fascinating because I'm not a rock climber.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated specifically with Alex Honnold, who is the gentleman who free soloed El Capitan, and they made the movie out of free soloing as the movie name.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm interested in it, I think it's applicable right now to this juncture in my startup, entrepreneurial endeavor, is that I did not realize that a lot of these professional climbers, they have a decade-long project. It takes them literally 10 years. It took Alex 10 years of climbing that rock.
Wow.
To ultimately actually then free solo it. And we're talking about going there for like months on end, climbing up and down that same thing, and then the precision. And so it just caused me to think about leadership. And, when I starting a business, like any kind of job that you have or anything that's worth doing is the like, just keep going and just keep getting marginally better and work on your mindset. Like there's so many leadership things in it that it's just been so fascinating for me to watch it.
I think that is amazing. And I'm going to go back now and watch that. I rock climbed in my 20s and I loved it. I think when we were talking earlier about the fact that women actually naturally are sometimes better than men because
Yep.
men have the strength, right? And so they can really rely on like their upper body strength to just do a certain grab or certain like jump and grab and pull, whereas women might not often have that same upper body strength, so they rely more on their feet and using all 4 points and just having that better sort of balance. I think that there's certain lessons that we can be pulling that relate to business from any of these sort of different activities and pursuits and interests. And the idea of women, gravitating more towards certain other strengths that they may have is applicable, whether it's business or rock climbing.
Yes, and also that caused me to think, because that was one thing I loved, is to see that women actually do really well in rock climbing. And they're also in the minority, right? So there are not a lot of women that are professional rock climbers. So I also like watching the women that are in that situation, because how they deal with being in a male dominated environment, which I think many of us are. And I think that has positives, and it can also have negatives. Just like anything, it isn't inherently negative.
Right. No, that's a great point. And I think having it's amazing to have both mentors and advocates. So as a woman leader, I have leaned on women like you, Kelly, that I've known, or you mentioned Sherry, Chris, obviously people that we can look up to, who have come before us or who are running lateral to us in this industry. But also it's equally important to have advocates. And when I think about when I started rock climbing, the group of people I did that with were all men, and they were my biggest champions, and they were the ones that were like training and supporting and literally like holding me up by the rope because we're on belay. And but now that you mention it, like I didn't have any sort of women rock climbers that I could really look up to. So thank you for being a woman leader in the real estate space that other women can look up to and model after. And any closing thoughts or words that you want to end with?
I would just encourage anyone, if you're in a transition, it's totally fine to be in a transition. And it's also fine to do it your way, however you want to do it. So if you decide that, going to work for someone is it, or working out on your own, or being in the gig economy, like you can do it your way, however you want to do it. And I really support people in that and value it. And if there's anything that I can do to support people on their journey in that way, I'm happy to do so.
And I know that you mean that because I have watched you. I have personally benefited from it. I have watched other people who reach out to you, and you're very giving of your time and experience. So thank you again, Kelly, for being here. We'll put info in our blog about a couple of the things that you've mentioned today, maybe something about El Camino, certainly about Mr. Hinault and the rock climbing, and then what your new venture is. We need to know more and get some links as you start building that out. So
Thank you.
thank you, Kelly. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.